Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm doing a review of The Mysterious Underground Men by Osamu Tezuka. Now, before I start reviewing this, there's a couple of things I need to discuss. The first being that this manga comes from 1948 and is generally regarded as the first story manga. Now, what exactly does that mean, story manga? Well, before The Mysterious Underground Men, the majority of manga was just purely comedy. It was episodic, there wasn't really much conflict, and the characters were, they didn't really develop, basically. So as a story, it was quite lacking in many regards. Tezuka decided to take what he'd seen in theatre and in films and apply that to the medium of manga. So he chose to bring in tragedy, adventure, action, character development, actual proper character development, etc, etc, and kind of present the story in that fashion. So, as from that regard, this manga is, a crucial piece in any collector's library. And if you're a collector of manga, that's pretty much sold you on it already. But what I want to analyze today is whether or not this manga holds up. Keep in mind, it's 1948. It's going to be a lot more basic than a lot of modern manga. I mean, manga was only finding its footing at the time. So, anyway, I'm going to analyze, see if it's still enjoyable. So, first of all, what is the plot of The Mysterious Underground Men? Basically, the plot, it opens up with a plane crash, a man being brought to hospital. This man is the father of our lead character, John. And basically the father on his deathbed asks John to create a mode of transport that is still efficient but is a lot safer than, air travel. And he proceeds to, die, and, John swears that he'll create a mode of transport that'll honour his father. While all that's happening, we are introduced to a bunny called Mimio. Mimio is a intelligent rabbit, he's able to do a good bit of things, and he's then chosen as the subject of a series of experiments run by these scientists, who basically turn him into a sentient being, which means that Mimio is able to think for himself, he's able to do things that would generally be considered only humans can do, etc, etc. But Mimio doesn't like his treatment, and he actually doesn't realize that he's a bunny rabbit. He thinks he's human. He escapes the laboratories and, is traveling through the city, but people are freaked out by him. Oh, it's a rabbit that can talk, etc, etc. So, he's kind of chased around, he's considered a freak, etc, etc. He eventually runs into John. And John decides to have Mimio accompany him on this project to create this new mode of transport. This new mode of transport is this kind of rocket that will go through the center of the Earth. Basically, it'll go from one continent through the Earth into another continent. It'll be much faster because it's going through the Earth rather than around it. It'll be safe due to, a bunch of designs that have been done at, etc, etc. But as you can imagine, once it actually starts going through the Earth, there is a lot of issues that crop up, a lot of conflict. So that's how the story begins. And does the story hold up? I believe it does. There is actually a good bit of character development, and in particular on the part of Mimio and John. And oddly enough, Hameg. If you're not familiar with who Hameg is, you can probably look him up. Anyway, there is a great sense of adventure, as we find out about this, as the title says, Mysterious Underground Men. The culture that's developed under there, how they started out, etc, etc. There's a good bit of physical comedy, as is standard in a lot of Tezuka works, until his Gekiga manga, where he kind of irons out the comedy. So, overall, I do think this manga holds up. Now, is it flawed? Yes. I mean, a lot of the characters that are introduced are wafer thin, in many regards, with only a few of them, the ones I pointed out, actually getting any proper development. The story is very compressed, A lot happens within like 150 pages, and there's a lot of developments that aren't actually fully developed, for lack of a better word, including a couple of invasions, including the establishment of a terrorist group. The story kind of rushes, and so the pacing's a bit off. But even so, you know, at the time, this was considered a really long work, you know, manga that was 150 pages, so you can't really blame Tezuka for that. But it does create some pacing issues. Now, I just want to touch quickly on what is probably one of the more famous aspects of this book. In fact, jokingly, this manga is sometimes called The Passion of Mimyo. And without going into spoiler territory, its ending is quite famous, or infamous, I guess I should say is the word. And does that ending work? I believe it does. It definitely drives home the point that the manga had about the whether or not Mimyo was human, and whether or not he should be treated as human, which of course acts as a very light allegory for you know, race relations, etc., etc. So I believe it does work. So overall, story, does it hold up? Yeah, I mean, it's just a simple adventure, really, with, you know, a couple of themes and, you know, character developments, etc., etc. It's a simple story. You don't go into it expecting, you know, a resounding epic, like, you know, a lot of other Osamu Tezuka works. It's simply fun and entertaining. Yeah, that's the best way to put the story. Now, to touch on the artwork quickly, as you can expect, at the time, manga was only finding its footing, and definitely does not really resemble manga as we know it today. First of all, I just want to address the paneling. The most common paneling in this is the 3 panels per page, each one being a kind of a horizontal panel, and that's kind of the majority of the paneling. There isn't really much change in terms of distance between characters and the audience. So, you know, we kind of see the same kind of angles over and over again, you know, the characters being of a kind of a mid-length distance away from the audience. So there isn't really much variety from that. I don't really recall any close-ups, although there are a couple of wide shots. In particular, something like this, for instance, where you first see the rocket. Now, having gone to that, I'm sure you've probably noticed that this is actually kind of in color. It is actually in color, but it's done on a very crude basis. Basically, at the time, manga was done through this thing called kakihan, and basically what that meant was that Tezuka would draw his works, and then people would actually kind of redraw it and use these plates to apply color. So if you look closely, you'll actually see, for example, that this, I'm not sure if you can see, this pillow that John has is actually meant to be colored red, but actually the red shape is correct. It's, you know, perfectly correct shape for the pillow, but it's just slightly off. So from that regard, it's very crude. But beyond that, it does present a kind of how manga was developing. All foreign comics were in color, and so I guess it was expected at the time that manga would follow in that pattern, that it would be full color, for lack of a better word. Now, it's also printed on brown quality paper. At the time, you know, the kind of clear white paper was kind of rationed for more important works, and so manga, which was considered a very kind of unimportant medium, was simply given this kind of brown, or actually sometimes was regarded as red paper, and Picture Box, the company that published this, decided to do so with that. Something that I found kind of funny, actually, is that Osamu Tezuka does do one page where there are 6 panels, but he actually has to number them to show in what order they go. So, you know, you can see number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, so basically down. So he has to actually explain to his audience, who are still kind of only learning about how to read manga. He has to explain to them how to read his works, which I find quite amusing. But even so, I just want to point out, see here, some of Osamu Tezuka's creative paneling already beginning to appear. One thing I just want to point out in particular are these two pages. Now, there is kind of here, as it launches, it's just kind of a normal shot. But here, down here, we actually have it spread across two pages of two different sizes. So we have kind of this size here, just showing the fumes coming off the exhaust of the rocket. And then going over to this page, we actually have a mountain, the mountain that is the rocket is going to go into, but it's actually in a much larger panel. So, for example, if I just want to point out, it goes here, but then it actually expands up to here, and we actually see the mountain going out of the panel, which was kind of unheard of at the time. So, we actually do see a lot of Osamu Tezuka's kind of creativity coming out. That's the best way to put it. But I do want to point out it is very basic in regard to panel use. And, you know, this is what you're going to see the majority of the time. The standard just 3 horizontal pictures with a couple of double boom pages every so often. So from a paneling perspective, very basic, but we do see how that paneling, that, you know, creative paneling that Osamu Tezuka would become known for beginning to appear. Now the characters themselves are very crude, I guess, in comparison to later Osamu Tezuka works. He was heavily inspired by American comics at the time, you know, like Popeye and, you know, the Disney comics, as well as previous Japanese manga. So the characters that we know, like for example, if I can just get up a picture, Mr. Mustachio and Hammock, they are very crude. They are slightly off model, and he hadn't really figured out how to draw certain techniques. Like one thing that kind of annoyed me in particular was there's a shot of well, he's actually known as not as Mr. Mustachio in this. Actually, come to I should correct that, as Uncle Bill. Anyway, point is there was a side shot of you know, Uncle Bill as he's beginning to go underground, and Tezuka hasn't really figured out how to do the mustache yet. There's this it's a very weird looking mustache where the mouth is at the side, and it's really weird. So that's just the best way to put it. So as an art piece, you know, we can definitely see Tezuka's development beginning, but it is crude. I just want to point that out. Now, regarding Picture Box's treatment of this manga, basically Picture Box has presented it as authentically as possible, with some changes. So regarding authenticness, let's start with that. So first of all, it's presented in approximately the same size as it would have been presented in Japan. If you'll just give me one moment, I'll bring out my Yatsuba. It is approximately this size, so just ever so slightly smaller than Yatsuba, as you can see. It's actually smaller than that, come to think of it, because you have this hardcover. I'll do that in a moment. And as I said before, it's printed on this brown paper, but regarding this paper, even though it has the color correct for, you know, how it would have been presented at the time, it's actually really high quality paper. It's very smooth, it's clean, there isn't really any page bleeding at all. Which I guess is for the benefit of, you know, the collectors and modern audiences, etc., etc. It's also presented in this hardcover, which is very high quality and looks very nice on the shelf. As you can see, it's also properly stitched rather than just simply waxed on the spine. And we are also, interestingly, given... Okay, if you take a look at this, as you can see, the brown is all the manga. What's this white at the back? The white is actually both an afterword from Osamu Tezuka, which he did in the 1982 as part of the complete works of Osamu Tezuka when this got a re-release, and also an essay written by Ryan Holmberg, who was a translator for this manga. And basically in the essay, he discusses you know, all the influences that Osamu Tezuka had. In particular, you know, like for example, you know, the plays that he attended when he was young, the comics that were brought over by the GIs, you know, during World War II. And we actually shown, you know, various panels from these influences. There's actually a lot of influences from Popeye, interestingly. And also regarding the, you know, several other things, like there's a famous science fiction novel called The Tunnel, which is also a big influence on the story. And also, this I found very interesting, there's a big influence from Flash Gordon, and in particular a serial, I think it was called, The Deadly Ray from Mars, which dealt with, you know, clay people and, you know, a queen who could manipulate people using, was it manipulate? Using a ring? I'm not sure. No, sleeping powder. So anyway, it's a very interesting read. You really do get to see, you know, all these little pieces of influence that Osamu Tezuka was, you know, exposed to at the time. We really do come to know how he began to, you know, revolutionize manga, you know, how he kind of viewed this medium and how he decided to, you know, change various aspects of it in order to create more drama, more adventure, more character development, etc., etc. So it's a very well written piece, very well researched, and I would highly recommend people who get this actually do read the essay. It's well worth reading. You know, don't just read the actual manga itself. So overall, I do believe that this manga does hold up. You know, it is an enjoyable read. It's not deep, not particularly deep at least, in comparison to a lot of other great manga pieces. But it is very important from a historical perspective and is well worth picking up. Now, just to point out, this is one important thing, Picture Box, which is the company that published this under its 10-cent manga brand, is out of business now. So if you want to get a hand on one of these copies, which I believe is still available, you'd best do that as soon as possible, because obviously there'll be no more printings after this goes out of print. So yeah, that's just something I think I should bring up. But anyway, point is, very good for a collector. A lot of fascinating insights, particularly with the essay, but also being able to see a manga from this time period and how it was presented to its audience, etc., etc. And I do believe that overall that the story holds up. Just don't go in expecting, you know, amazing panel work and, you know, really deep themes and deep characters. Just regard it as, you know, the beginning of, you know, the whole revolution of manga and being used as a storytelling medium. So overall, yeah, recommended, definitely. So that's my review of Mysterious Underground Men by Osamu Tezuka. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.